Hello guys, this is the third video in our Fatfree tutorial series. We have come pretty far. We have made some good progress in the last video. We are still working in the index.php file and only this file, but we have created some structure, we have created some routing, like you see here, we have 3 routes, and most importantly, these are defined in those classes above, and we have seen these methods that Fatfree provides to us. We can use these two functions before route and after route to specify some actions that happen before and after the routing actions are taken or the routing functions are invoked. When I say routing function, I mean these functions that are included into the routing configuration. So now that we have all this in place, I think it's time that we set up a more complex project structure and create some folders, separate the view and the controller and the models, but for now we don't have a database, so we are probably not going to use models. So for now we just separate the view and the controller. And we are also going to create configuration files like config and route configuration. And let me start with that one. So let's stay in the one file still for a little while. Let's keep this one file and add some other information in here. So this one, you can find the information that we are going to add on the Fatfree Framework website. If you go to user guide and you go to number 9, quick reference. And actually I only noticed this page after, I don't know, a matter of months, and never knew this was here, but thank God it's here. And it lists all the possible configuration variables that you can use. And it is important because this will define, you know, the Fatfree environment, how your server, what your server does, what is your configuration of your server. And let me tell you, this is a short list of what I'm using from all these settings. I use the auto load, and later on please read it in detail. So the auto load is a place where you specify the folders that contain your functional classes, and Fatfree will automatically load those classes as they are required. So that helps you with memory management, first of all, and second of all, you know, it will help you. You need to write less code, so it makes your life easier. Okay, cache is another one that I use. By default is turned off, you see here, and this setting can turn caching on or off. And yeah, you know, caching is caching and if you use it, it's often very useful. Debug is a debug level, and you see the values as well here. I use that. I don't use most of these, and I want to show you. Okay, logs is something that I use. It specifies the custom log location, as you see here, and I use the UI setting. It's very important because the UI setting shows the location of the UI templates. So UI templates is basically when we, you know, separate views and controllers. You will see that we're going to put our views in a separate directory, and this setting is the location of that directory. You can actually add more directories, more locations by separating with the pipe. Or actually you can use all these. I never knew you can use all these symbols. I usually use the pipe. Okay, so let's go back and see how we can provide one of these settings to our code. Okay, so let's apply this. I come here and say that I'm gonna set a global variable, and that global variable is gonna be debug. And the debug level that I'm gonna set is 0, which is, by the way, the default as we have seen. So what we are doing, we are setting the debug level. And you know that I have the habit to look at the code. Let's go back to base PHP, and this function here is the constructor of the base class, and I want to prove it. This is the proof. This is the construct function, and this is of course base PHP. And if I scroll down, you remember that I told you about the Hive. Hive is the variable that stores your global variables in the base class of Fatfree, meaning that this is Fatfree's global variables list. And you can find the same values here. So these are the keys, these are the variables that you can set, and these are all the default values, right? And you know, as a quick reference, you can also even use this code to understand what settings you know, you can apply. So let's come back here. So debug level is 0. And I want to turn this off. I remove the routing because you remember then we are supposed to get an error message now, which means that, you know, no route specified. So if I go back here and refresh, you see we get no route specified. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna change the debug level. So we change it to 1, we refresh, and you see that we get more information. So let's change it to 2, and we get even more information. And now we change it to 3, and we get even a little bit more information. So what does it mean? Of course, in terms of debugging, this means that on the development side, you better use level 3. On a live website, you better use level 0. But this is not the point here. We have not started to do this because of the debugging only. We are doing this to show you that this is the way we are setting the debug level. And when you work with Fatfree, you probably want to apply some settings on your environment globally, right? So you configure your environment when you develop or when you run something in production. So now we're going to add one more file to our project structure and use that file to store our configuration. Okay, so let's go to our terminal. Let's go to our project folder. This is the project folder, and you see we have the vendor third-party packages. This is the directory where we have the third-party packages, and we have our index PHP and the 2 files that are related to the composer. And this is the JSON. Composer JSON is the configuration file, and the composer lock is a log file that is, you know, is done by composer. It's internal stuff, so please, you know, take it as a black box. Sometimes you need to delete it, but I don't want to go into that now. So we create a new file and we name it config.ini. Okay, you see the new file is here. Let's go back to Sublime Text, and the new file is also here. Okay, so the way it goes now is that we have to specify a configuration file. So we go F3 and then we go config, and that means that now we are adding a config.ini file, and that means that we are going to remove this from here now and move it to the config.ini file. So that is that we go like debug equals 3. And what else we gotta do? We gotta apply this little word here. So what we're gonna do now here is that we say globals, which means that when F3 reads this config file, it will know that this is the part where the globals are stored, and the values here are going to be loaded into the globals. And there are a lot of, or not a lot of, but there are a couple of predefined words that you can use, predefined tags. And routes is another one. So if I say like routes, then and I add my routes here, those are going to be loaded to the system as routes. But for now, let's remove this because routes are going to be added to another file. I could add them to this file as well, but I prefer to add them to another file. So I delete this. And what I'm gonna do I'm gonna set the debug level to 0. Okay, so debug level is 0. We have specified the config file that we are using, this config ini, and we have still, the routes are still commented out, which means that I should, if I refresh this page, I should get the same error message but with much less information. And if I refresh this is exactly what's happening. And if I change this to 1, you see then again we get more and more and more. So it's the same thing. What we have done is just we moved the debug setting or the global variable setting initialization. We moved that to a separate file. And this is a good practice because later on as your project grows, you don't want to browse around for different variables. You just want to go to your config file and set the config file. And the good thing is that you can define whatever word you have here. You can override these values. You can set these values in your config ini. Plus, you can define your own. Like what you can do like message hello equals, and then we go message hello. And actually, I'm not sure if I should put that into quotes or not, but let's see what happens. So I put the routing back first of all. I'm gonna double check if it works. Yes, if it works. And now instead of hello world, I'm going to actually put that message. F3 get. Okay, then I go like message hello. That's what I want to do, and I say F3 because I pass F3 in there. And if I refresh that, you see message hello is displayed. So how about this? So what happened here? I defined a totally custom global variable, and I used that totally custom global variable to display in a routing context. So the takeaway for you is that you can create a config file, you can specify a config file to Fatfree, you can use and set predefined variables, plus you can set your own custom variables. Okay, let's keep it clean. I remove this. I don't want to see this here anymore. Okay, and now, okay, let's undo everything here. Okay, so let's make sure it's still working, fantastic. All right, so let's do the next one. The next move that we do is that we are going to move this routing into a routing configuration file. So let's go and create another file. You see that I'm going to the terminal and I touch the file, because touch means that it's going to create an empty file. It's not any. And if I list this is the empty file. You see it's 0 bytes. And you may be wondering why I'm doing this like touch and not like, clicking somewhere and say new file or something like that. And the reason for this is that I studied computer science at the university in the 90s, and this habit, it just stayed with me. So I'm just old enough to do this. That's why I'm doing this like this. Okay, so routes ini, and what I'm gonna do here is just copy and paste this line and specify the routes ini. So I open up. You remember that I need to use this tag. And now, what comes next? So we take these things and add them here. Of course, you don't need the code, so I will remove the code part. Yeah, I don't want to type this again, so that's why I'm doing it like this. Sorry. And just hang on for a second, then we're gonna be ready. Okay. All right. And we remove this one as well. So what does this mean? We specify the method, it's a get. And you can have actually, these are HTTP requests. So it may happen that you define a post. And this is in the Fatfree documentation. And I don't want to distract you. So let's stay with get, and then later on we may do some posts as well. All right, so this is the root address of your website. And that goes like main render. And you remember that we have this /hello/about, and these are two different classes and two different functions. So we have configured our routes, and if I come back to my index, I just very simply remove this. Okay, and just make sure that we added this file, and now we are going to refresh our website, and look what happened. Nothing, which is good, because we changed the structure and we are getting the same response. You see, it's the same output that we used to have before. So that helped us structure our website a little better. We have our index.php and config ini and routes ini in the same directory. So this looks much better, right? Now if I want to have another route, I just come to this file, add it here at the end of the file or whatever I like, and then it works. If you want to make a comment, you start with a semicolon and say that these are my base routes, for example. And then if you refresh, and wow, it's still working, meaning that this is handled as a comment, because otherwise it wouldn't make sense, so it's fine. All right, so we have two new files for our configuration. We are one step closer to a well-structured project. Now comes the interesting part. We gotta remove these ones, the classes. We gotta remove them to separate files and see how they're gonna work. And in order to do that, I need to introduce another concept to you before we move on, and that is going to be the concept of view templates. And view templates are basically HTML files that completely separate the representation, the UI, the user interface layer from our code, I mean our business logic code. And how are we gonna do that? We go to the Fatfree page, and there is an answer to every question, views and templates. All right, so let's click this, and you see that these guys are saying that we can use any kind of PHP in our template engine. So you see these are PHP variables. You can use the shorthand tag version of PHP, and you do it in a way that you do the routing. You see here that you create a view and then you render the HTML. So if this is your template HTML, this is going to be rendered in this function call. Originally my idea is that I don't want to show this to you because I prefer the Fatfree template language, which is much better, and this is supposed to be used with Fatfree. So you know what? And I stick to my original plan. So I will not show it to you. This is your homework. If you are interested, go on and try. Because what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use the Fatfree template language. So okay, let's scroll back. I wanna make sure that you understand what's going on. So what this means is that we create a template.html file. And in the template.html file, what Fatfree is suggesting that you can actually add an HTML tag. This is an HTML tag. I hope you are familiar with these. I don't want to talk about that. So in an HTML paragraph, you say hello, and this here is a PHP code section which says echo, and this is a value of a PHP variable, and that PHP variable is code name. Okay, so if you put that in a template HTML, then Fatfree will render this template HTML with the name variable set to the value word. So if this is the content of your template HTML, it finally is going to print out hello word, of course. And what you have here, this line is basically absolutely the same as this line. The only difference, I mean, in terms of results, so it's going to print hello world. It's going to use the same variable that has the name, so the variable called name. So it's basically, it means the same thing. It uses the same variable, you know, on this level. The only difference is the notation. And the notation is different because this is the Fatfree template language. And we are going to use it because it's easier to read. You don't need, you don't need PHP tags in there. And there is a lot more to it. There is a punctual notation, so you can use like, you get the dot notation if you want to use object properties. And there is a lot more to it. So let's stick to that, and let's work with this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do, we're going to create a template.html. Okay, so I'm going to come back here and I'm going to touch it. HTML. Template.html. Okay, so if I list this, you see I have an empty file here. So template.html. Okay, let's open that up. Let's come back and let's just use the example code. So I use that, but you know what? What I could even do is that I could basically add an entire well-formed HTML file so that you can see that this is gonna be rendered, and I give it a title like tutorial page. Alright, so this is regular HTML, and this part here is the template language, and we use the @ symbol to highlight that this next word is a name of a variable. Alright, so this is done. Now what we're gonna do, we go back to our functional logic here, and let's say that instead of this line, when we print hello world in our basic route, now this is interesting because if I want to show you what's going on, I need to touch multiple files. Okay, so this route means that in our root address on our local host, we call main and render, and in main and render, what we're gonna do is that we are going to render the template that's called template HTML. And that's what I'm saying, that I am going to copy this. And the reason why I'm going to copy this, you know, I felt really bad when I started the video that actually sometimes I need to, you know, copy paste stuff and I have to check how certain things are done. But later on I realized that this is actually very good news, because I've been using this framework for, I don't know, like a year now, and I still, you know, I don't remember how certain things are done. Because the good thing is that you have to do it only once. I mean, of course I know how to set a global variable, but some other things you do them once and you forget after that, because you can focus on your business logic, your own custom logic. You don't need to mess around with the framework. The framework is just, you know, framework just works for you all the time. So And that's why it's so important, because and so fantastic, because I have set it up once and it's been working and it's been stable ever since. So let's do this now. I'm gonna set the name to Word, and the template is a template, and echo template render template HTML. Okay, so let's go here, and if I refresh this, oh sorry, let's adjust the address. All right, you see, now this is getting even more interesting, because what happened was, you see, it's different now because it's a whole new concept. So what we did, we basically just rendered this template HTML, and you know, if you want more proof, I can add another paragraph here and say this is rendered from the template. And if I refresh this, you see that this is really rendered from the template. And the good news is that this code is still running, as we discussed before. So these things are still running. And now we have separated our business logic and separated our user interface into an HTML file. And it's working. So we are pretty good. We are on the right track. Now what we are supposed to do before I close this video, I think it's really time that we restructure our project. And restructuring your project is, you know, it's really, it depends on you how you finally do it. It's your preference, because with Fatfree you can do whichever way you like it. Okay, so that means that there is no predefined project structure. You can come up with your own structure, and it's a matter of taste how you do it. Fatfree has some example. You know, they provide a sample structure. I think it would take some time until I find it. So instead of doing that, I would go to our folder here, and I want to set up my preferred structure, and you know, you can do it whatever you like. So the way I like to structure my projects is that I already have a folder for the vendor stuff. So this is everything that is coming from third parties is in this folder. And I have a TMP folder, and I can show the contents of that. So this is our temp folder, and that temp folder is created by the system, by Fatfree automatically. And I need to find a place to my views, my controllers, my models, my CSS, my JavaScript in the future, if there is something. And if I create some other libraries that are not controllers or models, then I want to have some place for those files as well. And what else? And we need some place for our log files. If we have log files, we need to put them somewhere. So the way I like to structure that, I usually put my log files into my project directory. So somewhere right here. But I do not put my controllers and views into this directory. What I do instead, I create an app folder right here, and under that folder I will create my controllers and views. And you know, that helps me, everything that I have written with my own hands, that comes into the app directory. And everything else that's done by third parties or that's done by the system, like temp files and log files, will come outside. The only thing is that your index PHP needs to stay here, because that's the way we start up the Fatfree framework. And what I usually do, I also move my config file and the route config file, I also move that into the app directory. Okay, so let's go now into the app directory and create some other files, so like, other folders, controllers and views. So if I open it up, you see, this is where we are. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna move the existing files, we're gonna distribute them between these folders. This is Midnight Commander. I don't know if you know this. This is a very useful thing, and it was very popular in the 90s as well. You know, this is another thing from the past. Okay, so when it comes to views, I take my template HTML and move it to that folder. And now, if I refresh this, guess what? Wow, we get a huge exception. So what are we gonna do? But you see that this is interesting because you can see now that the before routing call actually happens and we get the exception after. So I did this on purpose because what we need to do now that we move this file, we need to specify the location of that file. And then that's when we go back to our globals and say that our UI is located under the apps/views folder. And then if I refresh this, I have an issue. Apps/views. Okay, and I know why, because I made a little typo. Okay, so now you see that with our config we were able to update and make it work again. Okay, so let's come here in our views. We already have one of our templates, and in the controllers we're gonna move. I think we're gonna create some new files, and one of them will be the controller class, and this is going to be the parent class of the controllers, of our controllers. So this is going to be controller.php, and then we're going to make another file called main controller.php. main controller.php. Okay, so this is here, and okay, what I'm gonna do now is I open up the app folder. Let's close some of these because we don't need so many of these open here. So in the controllers, I have two controllers. This is gonna be the parent controller. So I go to my index.php, take this class out of this one, and I'm going to add it to this file. Now there is something very important. This file is called controller, and I'm going to have to call it controller as well. So the name of the file and the name of the class, these two must be the same in Fatfree if you want to have them auto-loaded. So Fatfree auto-loading only works if the file name and the class name are the same. And you can have only one class in one file, and if you keep these two rules, then that means that Fatfree is going to do the work for you. It's going to automatically include these classes and include them, also move them into the memory and remove them out of memory on the fly runtime. So it's pretty neat. It's worth the effort to make sure that these things are aligned. So this is the mother or father or mother class. And we're gonna remove these actually. Okay, so if I said one class at a time, so all right, and this is going to be main controller. Okay, and it extends controller because we changed this as well, and then everything else remains the same. We come back to index.php, and this one, okay, let's remove this. So we are reducing functionality. We are not going to migrate that into the new structure. We reduce that and we remove the route as well. Bang, that's it. So what happened here? So we created two new files. One of them contains the base class, and this one extends that controller class, and this contains the actual business logic. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is that we have to set the name of this class. We have to replace it here. You know, you don't need to do this. I mean, this is only my fault that I gave them a different name. I'm just, you know, I'm refactoring it now. I'm setting up more proper names that I like in my new structure. So it's a bit of an effort. You know, later on, if you keep going, and then it's gonna be easy. I just want to make sure that now everything looks nice and neat and stuff. Okay, so now everything is in place, or it's supposed to be in place. So let's see what we have done. And this is fantastic, because right now it says not found. Okay, so this not found error is here. I need to think about this. But the thing is that I think the most important reason why it's not there, because we haven't set the auto load in the config file. And I was thinking about this, so auto load. So far I've done this on purpose, that I want to auto load the classes that are under app controllers like this. Okay, sorry, like this. So if I refresh now it's working. All right. Now, sorry, I just got a bit confused of myself, but I've done this part on purpose and I found it, so it's fine. So what you got to do is to set the auto load to include these files. Now, as far as I remember, this thing is done in a way that if you specify that folder, that it's going to auto load classes from that immediate folder, meaning that it's not going to load from subfolders. But I'm not sure of this, so I'm not sure if this is true. So let's try it. Okay, it seems that this is a true statement. So you have to specify those folders exactly. And if you create subfolders under controllers, then you will need to add more values here. You remember with the pipe or with the colon or a semicolon, but I use the pipe. Again, personal preference. Okay, so what we've got here, let's see what we've got. You see it's working, and if I take the other round, /hello, let's see if that works. And that works as well. And why is this different? You know, why isn't it on a new line? This is not on a new line because you remember that this one is just an echo, but this one renders a template. All right. So let's see what we have done. I think it's time we conclude this video, because we have made just a really big step, because we have restructured our project, and our project structure is this one. We have the index.php. That is, you look at this, it is so simple, it is so clean. We have loaded the autoload.php file from the vendor directory. That wheel is here, that is automatically loading all the classes from the third-party libraries. And right now this includes the Fatfree framework, but if you add more third-party libraries, then it's going to include those classes as well. Then we get an instance of the Fatfree framework base. Then we set the config file for the global variables. Then we set another config file for the routes, and we run the system. And this is everything we have done. This is awesome. Okay, so what else does it do? So when we configure the config ini, we set the debug level. Okay, that's fine. We specify the folder for the views. So that is the views, you know, this is our template.htm. This is where you specify how the page will look. and we specify the auto load. You know, this is a location where we store our controllers, and the controllers are just classes, and they are important because they are used in our routes. So when we set our routes, these are basically the controller class name and the controller function in that class. So this is how Fatfree works. You create classes, you create functions, they do the stuff, you specify where they are, here and here, you specify which HTTP address, request address, should translate to which classes, which function, and then you run the whole system, and then fantastically you get responses. I think this is a good basis for you to start out your own projects. You can, you know, make it more complicated, you can start building. I think you are ready. I will make more videos because I can add a lot more stuff. But tomorrow I'm going for vacations, so enjoy your time, work hard, and hopefully I see you soon, and I will come back with new videos. Cheers.